Da, da, da. Let's see how it presents like a notes thing for me, like the presenter, it's a slided note thing.
Oh, you're not seeing your notes?
Yeah. Yeah, but
What's the breakfast?
I do this.
It's a good day of the week for you to do that.
Wednesdays.
I know this, or I did.
Wednesdays.
Yeah, what about you?
Next, some Wednesday, not next week. Actually, I can't do it the next 2 Wednesdays because I'm traveling the following week.
I can't remember which one.
Next week
Awful.
It's presenter.
is a,
Sorry.
let me think about this.
Screen?
These are kind of like the only day I got.
I don't know if you want to do that, because then it might.
Next week. I have to do it.
I can't. Next week, 9th. What time?
I'll be over here at the workshop at
Yeah, what time? Like 8:00?
8:00, 8:30,
8:00 is fine.
uptown.
Yeah.
Let's do it like 8:15 or something like that.
Breakfast with Bernie.
Let me ask here something.
Yeah, 'cause then the park doesn't work. They'll work for about the first. Okay. Then, all right, that was great. Yeah.
It's not part of the world.
It's all right.
We have separate screens. I don't know if there's. It's really, really annoying.
Got, I always am, but it's got about snow last night.
Just asked
It's not-
Natasha.
You just
She
got, I
said that she had that same problem.
feel like you just got here.
What you could do is.
I go
You were
to
gone.
the Hilton Head, yeah, but we've been 5 months there. About, it's been 7 months between here and then traveling.
The
So
only thing I could think of is like you could send your slideshow to
travel,
me, and then you could look at it on my laptop,
it's a good thing. It's
your notes while you.
It's okay,
You sure?
Yeah. I remember if I'm missing something, I can go back.
And
Okay.
do you know any grad students in Portuguese
Oh,
who want to get paid to
no. It's
translate?
always like, I always remember.
Um,
Not even one of those things.
Okay,
Let me,
I
here's something you might not know about me.
speak Portuguese.
I know
Then
Portuguese.
I will
Are you kidding me?
look
Efficiently.
into it more.
Well, yeah, so there's a book on rotational grazing that's only in Portuguese.
Huh?
And yeah, I'd like somebody to translate it so I could actually read the bloody thing. No, wait, what are you doing this summer?
You just need to be able to like know the content. You don't need to scrutinize the language.
Really quick, grab a photo.
Yes.
Somebody that understands agriculture would be helpful.
Yeah.
You know how it is when you translate.
Yeah.
But a little
Robot do it.
I'll do like.
Have what?
Have a robot do it.
Like put it into chat
Yeah.
GPT and ask it to translate.
Google Translate.
ChatGPT.
Just copy and paste it.
No, it's
It's not digital.
not digital.
I probably take it to, this is what I do with my primary resources. Is I use the Abby Digital Reader at Wells Library.
That's great.
And that will like transcribe, it'll transcribe a page, like a photograph of the text into like a Word document.
Or if you have an iPhone, your notes app will do
Yeah.
it. Do you have an iPhone? Okay, I can show you how to take pictures of it and it'll read.
It's like 250 pages. You know how long that'll take?
It will take a long time.
Yeah,
but
I have like
it's
10,000.
Just as long to translate it.
Yeah.
Okay. You gotta translate it?
Well, then you can copy and paste it into like a chat GPT service and it'll translate it for you.
It's not a great translation. You wouldn't use it as a translation, but if you just needed to read it and see what it was about, that's good enough.
Even Google translates super good
Yeah.
these days.
Like, I do that for big pieces of text and then just so I don't have to like read 10,000 pages in French, and then translate 10,000 pages in French, and then I can return.
Okay.
Or you could find a grad student who wants to do it.
Does this sound like it's Ann?
I will be
Thank you.
trapped in
And for-
I will be searching that, so I think.
Right, no, it's.
Please a presenter view, enable presenter.
They're doing like the clinic introduction over an hour, so I have to run over there.
Oh,
I assume that.
That's
we got
cool.
a lot of blocks.
Yeah, okay.
I don't wanna.
Coming back though.
Yeah, I'm going back. yeah,
Okay.
and Everything.
Good presentation. Good, interesting. No, the questions she presented to me, she presented to what I saw was bunch of data about different things.
Going down here?
Well, we're gonna meet next week. and talk about it.
No, you're okay. Just,
Wasn't clear to me
yeah.
what the end products, what she's trying to find
What
out.
you trying to figure out? Okay.
Robin will be back.
They.
You wanna translate? You want?
I left with like 10 minutes left.
I saw
I can try.
demonstrated
Might
that
be looking at it.
all over the board.
Enable present.
She presented a couple of projects
Yeah.
together. That's just part of it.
Yeah, and that's okay. She was looking for input and she got some, and that was good.
Mhm.
Just got done and I said,
The morning. You wanna go?
what's the, when she told what we're being. Julia trying to, results she's trying to look for. And
Got
I
an answer.
It's moderate.
just couldn't tell.
It sounds like a good reason to meet.
You are going to moderate now?
And she's got a student. Maria,
Marie,
Marie, and Marie's gonna-
post
and
baccalaureate.
she's gonna join us.
Nice.
I love your fish book.
Gustavo,
Oh, thank you.
I got this survey yesterday.
I wanna do it myself. I don't know how to
Local
swim.
economy.
Yes.
How do you do?
Swimming, I'm like
I
35.
answered it.
so-
Thank you.
That they work with you. Yeah, yeah.
Reviews on, it's about.
Yeah, they're like, it's fine, just pop in and you're like, oh, I get it.
Hey, it's here. Yes.
I should-
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, thank you. And I think that
No, no. I work on presentations all the
they're
time.
going to be, I think, also useful.
I send you the link.
Things.
Yeah.
So essentially, it's
It's an improvement.
company, it's institutional.
Ready?
Too. So, yeah.
Give it like
So,
minutes.
Yes.
thank you for taking the time.
Is it a little dark in here?
It's a little dark in here.
It could be the, depending on.
It's a problem.
Yeah, I think it's.
Right?
Because there's no sunlight.
Oh,
Oh, the,
imagine. It might be different outside day to day.
because these aren't open.
It's not sunny, so it's not. Yeah, make sure it's blind screen.
You like that?
See, I'm now trying it.
People.
I felt like it's such a fun number. But.
Hey, how are you doing? Oh,
Great.
where do you get food?
This is leftover from Monday, I think.
So just check. So you are going to moderate now? Okay, cool. Just check.
I'm gonna try.
Put that drawer and you come back in.
Give it a minute.
Who are we waiting for?
Hmm?
Who are we waiting for?
Know anyone who might file in?
Oh, okay. I asked because I thought you had someone specific in mind you were missing.
So maybe sometime you can show me how to shut the sound off on my phone. Well,
Wow.
I can-
Okay.
I wasn't being condescending.
Well, I'm being serious. Like when Instagram, will like, is it Instagram? Or sometimes I'll come through, it'll still ding, you don't have all the sound.
I just put it on, do not disturb. I swiped down.
Oh, I think it's from the school, so.
Oh, fancy that. Which one of them?
So you're on.
Oh, extended day.
Really?
Okay, well, welcome everybody. Welcome to our research series here at the Ostrom Workshop. I'm pleased to introduce today's speaker, Shahzarin Khan. Shahzarin is a PhD candidate in the School of Public Health here at IU and a true interdisciplinarian, having previously studied engineering, economics, and the liberal arts. So her work focuses on sexual health in South Asian women, and today she will be presenting on sex, pleasure, and identity, an intersectional study of South Asian women in the US. So please join me in welcoming Shahzarin.
Thanks so much, Anne, for the introduction. I'm just going to start by sitting for now. I hope everybody can hear my voice okay. Okay. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present here because I hardly get an opportunity to talk outside my discipline. And it's one of my aims is really to make my work really understandable. I always say I want my work to be understood by my mom and my younger sister because they haven't gotten a clue what I've been doing in my PhD for the last few years, which is a common thing for all the researchers I'm guessing over here. So my name is Shahzarin and my pronouns are Sheha. I am a PhD student. I'm in my last semester. I hope to graduate this summer and this is my dissertation study. I just finished my data collection this Monday. That was my last interview and I will be presenting preliminary findings. I am from the School of Public Health and I'm from the Department of Applied Health Science. So I'm going to follow the format that Karen gave me, and it's about, I'll give an introduction about myself, why I'm interested in this study, what my research questions are, what the methods and methodology I used, what the results preliminary are, and then I love to hear your questions and how we can discuss further. Introduction about me and give a very good introduction. I never knew what I wanted to do in my life, so I jumped around a lot of hoops. And I came to do now the research I do, which is on sexual health, women's health, sexual pleasure, especially with South Asian population. I'm from India, so for me, that's something which is very dear to me. My dissertation committee members, the chair is Dr. Eric Walsh-Buhai, who works in similar adolescent health, sexual health. And one of my members is from the School of Education who advises me on methods, especially qualitative methods. So I really want, if some of you don't know what South Asia is a certain part. Has anybody been to South Asia before? No? Oh, that's great. You have? Okay. So South Asia is a certain part of Asia, which is also called where hairy people live. I recently heard that. So it includes certain countries like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, which are the major countries. They usually group together because they share a common history of colonization by the British, which is, they just got independent, less than 100 years ago, which is really young if you really think of that. There's a lot of diversity in terms of language, in terms of religion, and a lot of cultures. But I'm going to use South Asia as a group together for where my sample is drawn from. So a brief about my study. It's a qualitative study. I love doing qualitative study. I did a lot of math while growing up, but I came to my PhD and I learned how to do interviews and I was like, this is amazing. I did interviews with 38 participants. I did that online in the last 2 months. My main research question was really, how does our culture, how does South Asian culture, how does our background influence sexual health experiences, access to sexual health, our sexual life, our romantic life, how we develop relationships, especially of South Asian immigrant women in the US. So just to keep in mind, there are some things that might be, intimate over here. There might be mentions of violence. So please take care of yourself if you want to take yourself out of the room or anything at any point. I won't mind. So I know when I mentioned sexual pleasure, people have certain ideas of it. Can anybody tell me when I say sexual pleasure, what comes to the mind first? Yes, yes. Everybody says orgasm. Anything else? Okay, okay. First thing comes to mind is orgasms, definitely. Now, WHO, the World Health Organization, when they define sexual health, they said it should be absence of diseases. Yes, but it also says it should be pleasurable sexual experiences, which almost everybody forgets to include in the sexual health intervention. We concentrate a lot on how to reduce HIV, how to reduce infections, maternal mortality, which are really big problems, especially when I worked in family planning, contraceptives, where you'll be really scared how the conditions in hospitals are where women give birth. But we really forget pleasurable experiences. What does it really mean? Now, sexual pleasure, this is one of the technical definitions which is given. The last line is it includes thoughts, fantasies, dreams, emotions, and feelings. So, yes, orgasm is there somewhere, but that also includes a lot of other things. So, very surprising to sex researchers like me, pleasure is a primary reason for sex. That's the reason we have sex. Other than the main reason that people think we should have sex is procreation. Pleasure in public health is shown through a lot of research, intervention research, that it increases knowledge on contraceptives, knowledge of sexual attitudes. It promotes sexual agency. So we always teach, and especially in where I come from, we always teach you shouldn't have sex with these bad people. Sex means something wrong. You should protect yourself from these men. So if we always teach people like what is bad sex, we don't teach them what is good sex. How will they differentiate between good sex and bad sex? So it promotes a lot of sexual agency. When women know what good sex is, they can ask for good sex. They can have that sexual agency to protect themselves against STIs, infections, ask for contraceptives. Last is empowerment. A lot of research has shown that when women assert the right to pleasure, they also talk about this empowerment affects in other aspects of the life, such as education, civil participation. Sorry, 1 second. Okay. So yes, I feel like some of you might be convinced sexual pleasure is kind of important. So let's move to why study sexual pleasure with South Asian women. So I was always interested in sexual pleasure when I came here. And when I came here, my first time to the United States in the last 4 years back, I saw a lot of research was done in sexual pleasure. A lot of research was done in positive sexual experience, which is like great. But a lot of it was done with samples with really white heterosexual people. And I didn't find myself in that. No, has anybody heard of vagina monologues? Yes, these are really great. And when I heard them when I was a young girl, I was like, this is really empowering. But when I heard them when I was growing up and I realized a lot of these monologues, a lot of these scenes of vagina monologues talked about pleasurable experiences of Western white women. And they talked about sexual violence experiences of women from Middle East, Asia. I mean, yes, sexual violence is very prevalent in our country, in our culture, yes. But we also have fun, we also have pleasure, we also have sex, we enjoy it. So from research, from sex research, 60 to 80% of sample publications is dominated by Western educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic populations. That means mostly white and heterosexual people. Sexual health for minorities, especially ethnic and racial minority, focuses on disease and dysfunction, which again, it's a really important topic. And I've been working on this topic on STIs, violence, and HIV. But again, sexual health means absence of diseases and pleasurable experience. And we forget the part of pleasurable experiences. People who are racial and ethnic minorities, they face barriers in terms of intersectional identities. We're also going to talk about Crenshaw's intersectional framework later in terms of race, religion, disability, class, trauma. So their experiences in sexual pleasure is very different. And again, research has shown that, which I'll also show right now, is how culture and societal norms influence your sexual life. Okay, moving on to my research question. So just a summary of what I've discussed right now is most public health approaches approach deficit lens. They look at infections, diseases, and also look at sexuality education programs from an abstinence lens, which means, don't have sex before marriage, don't have sex before a certain age, be a virgin or, before a certain age. But that's not true. We all know that that's not true. Don't watch porn till a certain age. We all know everybody's watching porn. So how do we enable things so that we can support people, everybody around us with a certain age? And the second part is about how do we create evidence for women of color, people of marginalized identities, ethnic and racial minorities, and understand the effect of culture and pleasure on sexual pleasure. Next, research questions. So these were my major research questions. One was, there was very less evidence on sexual pleasure experiences of South Asian women in general, and specifically for me, South Asian women was really important. So I was like, really, my first question was, how do these women experience sexual pleasure individually, by themselves, with their partners? What challenges do they have? And second was, how do their identities, them being a woman of color, them being a woman, them being of a sexual minority, having background of sexual violence, trauma, and different kind of, like in my case, it's also being an immigrant in a new country. How does that influence their romantic and sexual life? I used these two theoretical frameworks. The intersectionality framework by Crenshaw, which talks about how we have different identities. Like I am a researcher, I'm also a woman color, I'm also an immigrant, but I'm also highly educated over here. So how do all of these interact how do I access my sexual and romantic life? So same goes for them. So how do the intersecting identities of my sample, of the participants, affect their sexual life? And the next one is really fun one, intimate justice framework. Has anybody heard of it before? Okay, so Sarah McLaren, she did this thesis and she talked about the intimate justice framework. So basically she said she did this research with two sets of people, with men, with men, and the second group was women and gender minorities. So she basically wanted to understand what are the anchors of sex. Basically, what does good sex and bad sex mean to you? So basically, for anybody who identifies as men in the room, what does bad sex mean to you?
Painful.
Yes, and you say that as you identify as a woman? Yes. Any men who wants to answer that? That's okay. So in this study, the men who answered that said bad sex means to us when there's no orgasm. And the women and gender minorities said that bad sex means to us when it's painful, when it's sexual assault, when there's unintended pregnancy. So what do you think you make of it? We have really different anchors of sex. We really, because of our social identity, because of our gender, our sexual orientation, we think of, our expectations of sex are so different. And that's what I really wanted to see, within this sample, how our social conditions, our sexual stigma, when we are said, oh, you're not even allowed to have sex before marriage. So how do we think, do we even deserve pleasure? Do we even deserve a good sex life? Do we Yes, so that's what I was really trying to find in this sample. What do they think they deserve in terms of sex? So next part is methods and methodology. So it's a qualitative methods that I'm using, semi-structured interviews, sample size of 38, which I feel very proud of. Recruitment that was targeted to US college students mostly. Online platforms were used, community networks were used, cultural centers on campus. Word of mouth was really huge. I used deductive thematic analysis, and I'll come on to that. So the eligibility criteria was around this: between 18 to 30 years old, young women. They must reside in the US. They must self-identify as a woman. They're either born or spend majority life in a South Asian country. And the last one, having a .edu email ID. So I don't know if any of you does qualitative methods, but recently, since I don't know, ChatGPT and all these things are happening, there's an increase in number of bots and spam that are coming. Like they would fill in and they would just be like, they're not a real person, or this is somebody, a false person. They would just sign up. So I wanted to ensure the person who signs up is a real person. They should be given, because this is also incentivized based program. So that just helped me ensuring the person a real person. This is the flyer I used to get things going. Something I really feel nice about is about the interviews being available in different languages, English and two other South Asian languages. I translated, transcribed, and de-identified the data and used a qualitative software. We were 2 coders who were working on it. We kind of used themes from my research questions and my theoretical framework, trying to understand how do the identities, how do the gender, sexuality, background influence on sexual pleasure. Going to the results. So major of, so out of 38 folks, majority of the participants fell between 21 to 27 age range. Majority of them were heterosexual. Over here, it's specified that in South Asia, it's really considered a crime to be, other than heterosexual, to be gay. In India, recently, I would say recently, maybe like 5-6 years ago, it's not considered crime to be gay, but it's really risky to tell somebody, hey, I am gay. People would report you, people would expose you to your family, in your society. There's a lot of stigma attached to it. But in other South Asian countries, it's still a crime. You would be reported to the police. So it's, even if after coming to the US, people would be really scared to identify themselves as something other than heterosexual. A lot of the participants were from India. They were also Hindus, which I'll come to the next page. Majority of them were sexually active, which means they either masturbated or either they were having sex with a partner. So I've just divided the results into 2 parts right now, which is what really works for South Asian women's pleasure and what are their barriers. So what works for their pleasure? Moving to the US and support from friends. Now, moving to the US, now all of the participants who came, they either moved to the US for studies, they either moved to the US for work. Now, it's very important to understand the South Asian cultural context and the restrictions for unmarried women especially. There are a lot of restrictions for unmarried women in terms of they wouldn't be allowed late at night. There will be restrictions on what kind of clothes you're wearing. There's this certain kind of rape culture where you might have also seen in America, but it's very prevalent in South Asia, where you're wearing certain kind of clothes to incite men, young men. So if you're wearing like sleeveless, if you're wearing short clothes, you're not allowed to go outside the house in certain parts of South Asia. There's also a lot of judgment around. Everybody knows everybody. So I think this is part of very community-centered living in Asia generally and in South Asia, that, oh, if I go around and I'm hanging out with a boy, the aunties and uncles will tell my mom and dad, be like, hey, what's going on with your daughter? Is it something serious? Should they get married? things like that. There's no privacy to have sex. First of all, you can't date. Expectation of sex before marriage is like literally nil. It's impossible. You shouldn't be doing that. There's people live mostly in joint families, means one house probably has more than 5 to 6 to 10 people. You don't have a single room. You can't go to like hotels or any places to have sex because they will report you saying you are not married and you're having sex, and say to your police or the community. Buying sex toys in South Asia was very difficult, at least 5 years ago. It wasn't accessible, it was not affordable, but things are improving now. So understanding all these aspects, what the participant said is, one of the persons said that you don't have many people who know you in the US. And in India, almost everybody knows you around you. So the judgment for something that is passed is a lot. So I think everybody almost said that nobody knows me, I can do anything. And that doesn't mean they want to do something wrong. They're like, I just want to go out at 9 p.m. at night, at 12 a.m. at night, even though there's nothing to do. I just want to get out of my house. I want to wear what I want. I don't want that restriction. I want to talk to anybody I want. I don't want anybody reporting on me, policing on me. Similar to what the second person says, you don't have to worry about anybody finding out about you and keeping it a secret. My mom wouldn't be finding out about me over here because I'm out late at night as long as I want. So that's part of it moving to the US. Support from peers. I think this was again huge. There's a lot of guilt which I'm going to talk about later, but there's a lot of guilt that comes, sexual guilt that comes when you come of a certain age, you see all your peers having sex, dating, doing a number of things, but you also feel that sexual guilt that I'm going against my religion, I'm going against my culture, my mom is also going to be unhappy about me, my parents are going to disown me, but I really want to have this life. Why can't I have this life? I'm seeing this in media, my friends are doing it, so they do have this dual life. But when they talk to their peers about it, like over this example, somebody from Bangladesh talks about it. I think, I don't know what age, but in high school, she talks about masturbation to her friend. And talking about masturbation among girls is almost non-existent. And she talks about it and she's like, that's the first time I started feeling guiltless. So support from peers, especially women, talking to each other about challenges as well as positive experience was huge. We're going to talk about few challenges such as vaginismus, which is like pain on penetration or any kind of unwanted sex. Women talk among each other and they feel better. Especially also after moving to the US, they talk among each other that this is the challenge I'm facing. This is what is the expectation about marriages. And also about safe sex, like how to get STI, HIV testing. When I was talking to a lot of these participants, and because I'm a sex researcher, almost everybody gave me heart attacks about how they were not doing STI, HIV testing, not using condoms, just waiting for symptoms to occur. But there were some people who would be like, oh, we have this group and yearly we go together to get testing. And this is how we tell each other that this is how you have safe sex. You always carry in contraceptives and things like that. Going to the second part, which was bigger than I thought, because I really wanted to go into positive sexual experiences, but the barriers really came through. One was sexual guilt, which I was mentioning about caused by religion, especially Islam and Christianity, where everybody was like, masturbation is sin, anal sex is a sin, oral sex is a sin, sex during Ramzan is a sin. There's just these intricate rules around which they manage. There's expectation of no sex before marriage. It's just unheard of. Like, it's just impossible. There are very few people where parents are okay with the idea of dating. Hiding from parents about dating, again, that also influences their confidence. Again, sorry, I'm into this. So majority of them were Hindus, and these are two people who are from Bangladesh, and it talked about how religion influenced their guilt. The first one talked about an 18-year-old girl, and she talks about how Allah is going to be mad that we're doing this. Doing this is intercourse, sex, and especially Ramzan is coming. She told her boyfriend, like, we can't do this, sex during Ramzan. She told me that she's having sex for the first time at 18 and it's just been 1 month. And as Ramzan comes, which is I think March, she's just gonna stop having sex because it's religious. The second one was again somebody Muslim from Bangladesh, and she talked about when she was in high school, she was masturbating and she felt really a lot of guilt. And she just knew it was a lot of guilt. She prayed to God for forgiveness and that something bad has happened. Now, all this sexual guilt leads to plays different roles in their life. Has anybody heard of vaginismus before? Yes? Yes. Can anybody tell me what they think it is? Anything?
Just pain, right?
Yes, yes. So vaginismus is, people with vulva, they experience pain on penetration. So it can vary from just putting a finger inside. It could be tampon, menstrual cup. It could be, there's a range of things you can put inside, like a sex toy or penis. So they have difficulty ranging from having intercourse to putting period products inside. Now, these could be due to mental or physiological reasons. Sometimes doing pelvic exercises, Kegel exercises can influence them and make it better. But in my sample, 4 people said they have vaginismus, and they said this is due to mental reasons. And these are reasons also cited by research that a lot of times where sex is taboo in a culture, it can cause conditions like vaginismus. People talked about how scared of being pregnant. They were just scared of the pain of first-time sex, especially in South Asian cultures. There's also a lot of Black communities. There's this idea very much enforced that the first time it's just going to be painful for you, no matter what. It's just enforced very hard. And few people talked about, I'm just so scared. They're probably in their 20s, they have a partner, they do other kind of sexual activities, but they just don't want to go through the painful intercourse. They're scared about hiding from parents, about dating, about having sex. And they're really scared that they have a bad moral character because they're dating, they're having sex, they have a boyfriend, they're doing these things instead of studying in America or, getting financially independent, getting a job. They just feel a lot of this pressure about not being able to pay their loan and things like that. Second is body image issues. I think when you talk to a lot of women, body image issues is definitely going to come up. So for this sample, a lot of it was related to weight, skin color, and body hair. So one thing was very commonly said by women over here is they just don't enjoy oral sex. They said, whenever somebody's doing oral, my partner is doing oral sex on me, I'm so conscious. This person says, I'm just worried if I'm smelling good or if I'm clean. I'm just so conscious about it. And I just don't want my partner to. And, this was said by multiple people. They would do multiple things. They would get pubic hair waxed, shaved, etc. There would be these high expectations they would have about themselves, and they would not be able to enjoy sex. And there would be different versions of it. They would be sucking in their tummy while having sex because they felt that they're being huge. Another person talked about how in South Asian culture, it's very common for people when they meet you, people give just unsolicited comments on your weight, on your color. You meet somebody and be like, hey, you look fat a little. Or you look tanned. Skin color is again really big. Like, people really value fair skin color. So anything, if you look a little bit dark, it's like, oh, you should do something about your skin color. And especially coming to the US where you start dating interculturally, the difference is very stark. And again, with body hair, there's this idea where everybody says, oh, I can't have spontaneous sex. I have to shave everything off my body. I want to have this baby smooth skin. That just is a lot of high expectations, which people with this participant develop from seeing media, porn, expectations from their boyfriends. And it's really hard, where they also acknowledge, I know I'm not being a feminist. I know this is not normal to do, but I can't can't have sex without it. Unwanted sex, this is one of the last results, has anybody heard of unwanted sex? Yes, yes. Okay, what do you understand about unwanted sex?
I know I'm from the Netherlands. I know we have new legislation in which you actively ask for consent before even thinking about next steps.
Yes.
So
yes.
making sure that you're on the same page.
Yes, that's an important point. So one thing is about consent, consensual sex, non-consensual sex. You ask for consent, and if there's no consent, it's a non-consensual sex. Now, what happens in like long-term relationships? Somebody I'm going out for a long time. We have this habit, every weekend we go out and then we do some kind of sexual activity. Then we don't explicitly ask for consent, right? With a long-term partner. We just be like, hey, this is a pattern. I love you. You love me. Let's just do something. But what if I'm not in the mood? I'm tired. I don't feel it. I don't have desire. So even though there is consent, I don't have any desire to have sex. I want to just postpone it. But I give in to that sex because, many reasons over here, participants say that I'm just tired. I don't want to disappoint my partner. I don't want to create a big deal. I am scared he'll be disappointed. I want to give him his pleasure because he's been nice. He's a nice partner. Various things like this. So unwanted sex is, even though you've given consent, you don't want that sex. You don't desire it. It's not pleasurable for you. You're just doing it for the sake of it. It's very common in long-term relationships. So one example this person gives is that she was dating somebody and she's like, the sex wasn't painful, but I just felt like I'm a vessel for this person to fulfill their pleasure. And I was just sitting there and she also talks about being dissociated. And she just cried a lot after it all went through because why didn't she say stop to him? Why she's like, how can I say no when I don't have any pain? How can I stop this? We're just supposed to sit there and provide pleasure. And the second person talks about her long distance relationship is that if I say no, they will think badly of me. If I say no, they'll be disappointed in me. If I say no, I will not be a good partner. And I know all this is ridiculous, but if I say no, because it'll be disappointing, it'll be disappointing to my person, and I can't dare disappoint my partner. Many of the times they also say, oh, they'll leave me. And they know it's not logical reasoning of all this. I think it comes down to valuing men's pleasure over your own pleasure in these relationships. So lastly, coming to strengths and limitations, firstly, it was really hard for me to do literature review on sexual pleasure. I did find a lot of sexual health studies on South Asian women, which are again very deficit based, but this concentrated a lot on sexual pleasure experiences. It is done in multiple South Asian languages. Again, my idea is that I could use this data. There's a lot of evidence on support groups from this study. Support groups are really helpful to discuss challenges such as vaginismus, to discuss safe sex, how to have that. So working with college health centers and cultural centers on sexual health interventions. Limitations, again, South Asia is very diverse of different cultures and languages and religions. Study is not representative of the diverse population. It was mostly dominated by Indian Hindus, which have their own cultural diversity. So future samples to include intentional diversity. My learnings from this, I was really grateful for the funding I got from Ostrom and other sources. The incentive really helped me to get the participants word of mouth, campus culture centers. I was really surprised so many people wanted to talk about sex. Honestly, the first few weeks, especially the first month, nobody really came. But then I had continuous interviews for so many days. People really wanted to talk about sex. Few of my interviews went more than 2 hours. And again, people also wanted money. So for me, something that was important was doing the check-in with peers, like my dissertation committee members, during the interviews for debrief. It was, there were a lot of difficult conversations regarding violence, body image issues, And I think because I'm somebody who's very close to this study as my identities, a lot of them were triggering to me, which I didn't realize while going into it. So I think just doing that check-in with different people was really helpful. And lastly, I don't consider myself South Asian expert because I've lived in South Asia for a long time. I don't know if other people who have lived in an area for a long time think of that, but I did involve a lot of South Asian sexuality experts when I was developing the interview guide, and that was really helpful. So, wow, I talked 40 minutes. That's all in terms of what I wanted to talk about. Thank you so much for listening to me. You've been really kind audience and being very attentive. I am open to questions, and thank you so much.
So we will open up for questions, and per tradition, we can take questions from students first. Takers.
Oh, no.
I think I can. Thank you for the presentation. It was very great. I'm thinking, what do you think after, if you had the results, like maybe to do a guidebook, to write like a blog, how to like publicize these conclusions that you got from the interviews with the framework?
Yeah, I think one of the like immediate things I'm thinking, like dissemination, is just making it in like easier language. I know publishing will take forever, but just I know a lot of people, just like South Asian women in the US or in India, will just benefit like, hey, this is a problem I associate with. Just having it on social media or having it in a very easy to access language. This could be partnering with other nonprofits and disseminating through them, just having like one kind of like a workshop. I've done similar on campus where people really enjoyed just talking about it, having that space. So that is something definitely on my mind to do that as soon as I, yeah. Thank you for the question.
Okay, super fascinating research. So couple of questions that I was thinking. So it's I was struggling trying to understand the kind of the implicit control group, essentially. And I was thinking about what could be your potential kind of control group. Okay. So a couple of ideas. So it's like one option would be you take a sample of women's more or less with the same type of characteristic educational level in South Asia. Okay. But probably that's not kind of a good point of reference because like you are moving to a different environment. But what if you consider a comparison between first generation of South Asian women, okay? So parents came to the US and then they're their first generation here versus the ones that move for the first time. So, and that's your point of reference and your comparison, and you see that difference. I think that will be super interesting, The other point of reference that I was thinking is, well, you take, other women on campus of, any other ethnicity, place of origin, and you use that as a point of reference. So anyway, so like maybe it's not very clear, but I was trying to figure out which kind of control group you can think about it and what you can learn in the comparison. Okay, and then the second thing that I was thinking is if again I understand that it's qualitative and you have so what was your sample 30 something for
37.
So maybe, what I'm about to say, there are limitations, but it's to some extent, who is the partner of these women matters, okay? Is another Southeast Asian person the partner, or is a non-Southeast Asian partner, okay? And then again, I don't have any clear idea of what kind of difference you will be finding, but I would be intrigued to know what are those differences, okay? Yeah, I know, those are my two comments.
Yeah, I think the second part, what you said, that's an emerging finding from mine. The people, the few of the women I talked to, they said when they came to the US, they strictly didn't want to date South Asian people. They were like, I'm sick of, they said this, I'm sick of the patriarchal structures back. They're like, you know, they also like, oh, I've seen my parents' marriages. I've seen my uncle and aunt's marriages, and I see how they treat women in the family. The huge gender norms, women stay in the kitchen, they have this unpaid house or labor, and they don't get appreciated. And it's very true. We see a huge difference when couples move to the, you know, abroad, and, you know, they divide the labor equally, and that's a difference. But in, you know, back in South Asia, there's this idea where women are supposed to do everything for the house. So there were a certain section of women who were single when they moved to the US, and they were like, I'm just not going to date anybody from South Asia. And they wanted to date somebody outside the culture. And I was very interested in, like, you know, what are the experiences, and what you said about somebody dating South Asian versus somebody not dating. There were people who were talking about multicultural relationships. Yeah, I think that part was really there. About the control group, I have really thought about that, you know, how would that play? Having a control group, I think at this stage, I was really trying to find like what I really, you know, I wanted to do a survey. The next stage, I really wanted to do a survey and be like, understand, use a lot of scales and to understand a bigger population, because this is just 30 something. I really want to understand what is like problems, like something like vaginismus. I was like, I didn't even know that's like a problem, because a lot of this was also undiagnosed. A lot of these participants are really scared to go because they're like, no, it's not a big deal. It's all in my head, you know, something like that. One of them did go to a doctor and they were like, go to therapy. And they're like, no, I don't. Another part is South Asian people. Somebody also said, therapy is for white people. That's also the thing about going to therapy. We don't go for therapy. So I think those are things I wanted to get, those emerging topics, what's like guilt is playing a role, and then use a survey and probably understand then like a control group and comparison. So those are really good points. Thank you for raising that. Yeah. Yes.
So, here's a comment. I almost didn't come. Let's face it, the topic for a guy that's so, but I'm really glad I did. Your presentation, your organization presentation was excellent. I mean, you really did a good job. It's qualitative and you've got this very small sample. And that's the worrisome thing about saying very much about it, because how do you only got 38 samples and 31 of them from India. I mean, you've really got this narrow, small sample. How do you make it, how do you take it, it's a pilot. How do you take it to a bigger level when interviewing takes a lot of time? How do you do that? Or how are you thinking about that?
Sorry, are you a qualitative researcher?
What?
Are you a qualitative researcher?
I'm not a qualitative researcher.
Yeah, I think that this is like a question qualitative researchers get a lot is, I actually had like a sample size in mind of 20 people. That's usually the sample size people go for qualitative research. 38 was too much, honestly, and it sounds very disturbing. The idea is honestly not to take the sample size beyond 38, because what happens with qualitative research is there would be similar things that would start coming, that things like sexual guilt. Almost everybody talked about it. After 20 people, I was like, please don't bore me with your sexual guilt stuff, But, after so with the idea of qualitative research is you find common themes, and then you find which gets saturated. Then you find new themes. And with even 38, I could keep finding new themes because, people are from diverse cultures and backgrounds. There's always, because it's so exploratory, there's almost so much to talk about. People would love to talk about. People wouldn't stop talking. But I had this sexual guilt that I really wanted to talk about. I really wanted to talk about the sexual pleasure lives. So my intention is to not go beyond that sample size. My next step is to use the emerging theme from this, what is major coming, and use it in a survey to test with a bigger sample size, use like a mixed methods or probably like a quantitative survey. Because I wanted to, a lot of the sexual surveys are done with not culture in mind. they would test for like, do you have any problem with, your pleasure, desire, etc. But that's mostly tested on like, again, white heterosexual people, but not tested outside the Western culture. So that's also one other thing I'd really want to test in. But before that, I should know what the emerging problems or challenges really are. So that's what I'm going to think about. Yeah.
Yeah, so I just want to build on Reed's question about your survey. I'd be curious if you are going to include demographic questions in there, in part because I think this question about sort of how people view their partner if they're not in the same background as they are. So right, I spent about 6 months in rural, like Chhattisgarh, India. And like, we were the very first like white people that this generation of people living there had ever seen. And that had very particular implications for the way we were gendered. That it was very clear was obviously not the case, right, for people living there. And I would expect very much for that to shape how people perceive their sexual experience, right? Of how they see status, existence, accessibility of the other person that they're with. So I was sort of curious if that's going to be part of your broader survey as you think about like how these themes play out in a more generalized way.
Yeah, I'm definitely very interested in like couples views. Because there's this one side where, because one of the things I noticed when I was also talking about this standards of sex, when women talk about, oh, I'm really happy, I don't need an orgasm to have sex, things like that. And they would just put men on a pedestal because they're nice, they ask for consent. And I'm like, too low standard. So I really wanted to understand from both their partner's view, how they view as sex and how they view their sexual pleasure in comparison to their partner, So that was definitely something. Doing a couples thing is really important for me, just looking at this identity, because I felt it was very skewed when I was looking at, because the participants painted these men as like, oh my God, he asked for consent, he's so nice, I should just give him everything.
I'm really interested in that. By the way, this is a really important topic, and I thought you did a great job presenting it. It was really engaging. And the cultural aspects I think are incredibly important. And I know, I mean, it appeared as though, most of your participants were from India. Were most of the ones from India, were they mostly Hindu or, and so did you notice, and there were like, one Christian, maybe like one Muslim, and I'm curious, like down the road, what you would expect from like the different religious cultures, and how, because I've never obviously studied this, it's not in my wheelhouse, but I'm curious, would you have hypotheses about different religions and how that would come into play?
I really wanted to get into that. So one thing that came up with Indian Hindus a lot was, I don't know if you know about the caste system that exists in South Asia and India. Like, people know about it. People are like, oh, caste, like you kind of treat yourself, people who are rich, who are, they treat themselves much more above and beyond than people who have a lower caste. And that exists economically and probably in a professional sense, social sense. Now, what happens in a romantic sense also is, it's from a marriage perspective, one is not allowed to marry outside the caste. And this is something almost everybody in the Indian Hindus group said. I'm very liberal, I'm, gender fluid, I'm pansexual and all of these things, but I'm not going to marry outside my caste. This is not what my parents wanted to be. Not realizing they're perpetuating a caste system, a system of inequality when they say all of this. When I ask them, how does religion or how does, your community influence your sexual romantic life? They're like, no, I'm very like, agnostic, it doesn't. And when I ask them about specific, what kind of partner do you want? What do cultural background? They're like, no, I want somebody my parent agrees with. And we all know your parents want somebody who's from the same caste, religion, and all that boils down to this caste is, being of similar blood as you. The idea is that somebody of a lower caste is considered dirty, impure. They have, so that is something, I do have some evidence of it. And that's something, and also it's also difficult to ask people's caste. And one of the things that I also understood from everybody, Indian Hindus, everybody is of upper caste over here. People only who have a lot of privilege to come here, get a ticket, international ticket, get that education, even think about doing a master's or a PhD or any kind of education, are all of upper caste. So I wouldn't hardly, maybe like anybody, I would get somebody of a lower caste in this immigrant population. I did also find a lot of Trump supporters in the Indian Hindus gang. So for me, that was really, it was really interesting how your religious identity affects your sexual romantic life. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
But just a quick follow-up. You have 38 samples. Are they mostly from Indiana University? Or you don't know that?
No, they're mostly from Indiana University.
So I realize, where they came from, but most of them are going to school at Indiana University. Okay.
Yeah, one quick question, and I loved your presentation, so thanks a lot. Perhaps two questions. One, I would be interested in the male perspective as well. So perhaps you could say a few words about that, specific for the group of Southeast male people. And secondly, and more importantly, it struck me that you did not get into, let's say, the outside world. We are presented a romanticized view on sex, and it struck me that none of your quotes is about that. So either it's in movies and it's to be all romantic, or it's in porn and you need to get going for hours on a row. So that view that is presented to us as sex is absent in your in the quotes you presented. Were they absent in your interviews as well, or did you just not present them here?
Do you mean like the sexual?
How is sex presented in the US? As in movies, as in porn, and what does that do to the women's image of sex?
Yeah, so that was really interesting. I didn't ask much on it, but a lot of women were like, because I would ask them a lot. So very interestingly, a lot of women would be, they say, hey, I don't masturbate. It doesn't work for me. I don't get turned on by my body. I find it gross. I can't touch myself. So there's something called low genital self-image where, women are really ranked low rather than men on it. They just hate their body. They can't touch their body. They don't know where vagina, vulva, all the different parts of the body is, which is also harmful because if something wrong happens, which usually does, there are a lot of infections, yeast infections, it's difficult to go to the doctor and be like, hey, something is wrong. So one part was that. So the other part of it, I'm like, how do you turn yourself on? They're like, oh, sometimes I use porn, but porn is I don't like the porn because there's no female-centric porn. And they talk about how I remember one participant talking about, they show this gangbang in porn. And how do you get so many people? What's the logistic of it? It's not practical. So a lot of women talked about that porn really doesn't work for them. And it's very male-centric. It also influenced their ideas of like, I see in porn women having orgasms, but when I started having sex, I didn't, so they were like, this is completely false. And also the idea of like how their body should be, how it should be baby smooth. And they just carry that idea for a very long time and they feel bad about it themselves. They also talk about something about movies and, when they come to US, which is really fun. Which is a really fun way because in India and South Asia, you don't see a lot of people of LGBTQI identity. So it's when they come here, they see a lot of people doing PDA and they see a lot of like open conversations on being lesbian, gay, and they're like, oh my God, I only saw this in movies. I didn't know people kissed here in out and open. So I feel really shy looking at them. So that was one of the few things that they said. I don't know what you wanted to understand about the male perspective, because that's such a broad question.
Yeah, I think mainly in absence of proper education by parents of at school, where do you navigate what is normal sex from? Well, it's either from the porn side or from the romantic movie side if there's no other sources. So I was interested in how that works out for both male and female, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's mostly porn for men, and I think a lot of even that was mentioned in the participants' conversation. The participants mentioned my boyfriend thinks he has a porn addiction, and even when my previous research, I was doing masturbation study with Indian women. They're like, my boyfriend masturbates too much, and and I'm like, how many times? He's like, he does once or twice a week, and I'm like, I didn't say that, but he's a young, energetic man. Please let him masturbate once or twice a week. So there's this idea with like, oh, masturbation is bad. We don't talk about masturbation. Men masturbate all the time. And there's a lot of shame associated with it, especially men masturbate and women don't masturbate. That's one part of it. A lot of I think there's also this big rape culture that exists. And when I say rape culture, it's a lot of, so one of the examples of it is marital rape is not a crime in India, in South Asia. So what that means is it's, if you have unwanted, unconsensual sex with your wife, it's okay. You cannot hold it up in court. So that implies a lot of things in South Asia. So in long term, a few of the participants had sexual assault during their intimate relationships. And they just said, we see this happening a lot, but we never report it in marriages. How can I report it in my long-term relationship? So with all of that existing, that's why that sexual trauma existing, many of them have had experience. I mean, that goes for all women in the world. Everybody has had some kind of bad sexual unwanted touch. But with that existing, I think from that comes a lot of, oh, the man I get, I'm going to, have less standards to it. And I was really amazed at what less standards people go to, because they just want a man in their life. If he's emotionally stable, if he's fine, he asks for consent, that's all. If they're not sexually compatible, it's fine. If they're not having sex for 4 or 5 years, it's fine. He's just there and he's a decent human being. Otherwise, sex doesn't need to be part of their life. So, yeah.
Final thoughts, comments, lingering questions? Well, thank you, Shahzarin.